friends, and you can get a certificate of attendance, and you get to learn about different ways to interact with your students and motivate them in the classroom. And one of the ways we're going to talk about today is through the news. And primarily for English language teachers, but there's also a lot of things that I'll be sharing that you can use with general education classes as well, especially like history classes. So I want to share a little bit about that. Unfortunately, I'm currently working on a book, The 30 Ghost Challenge for Educators. So the wiki isn't exactly finished, but if you check tomorrow, I will finish the wiki with the resources. Volume up. Okay, can you hear me better or no? Can everyone hear me better now? Or do I need to be louder? Okay, great. Why use the news to teach English? Well, there's many reasons why to use the news to teach. First of all, it makes real-world connections. When we use the news, we really motivate students to look at the world around them. We connect the learning to the real world. It's something that's happening now. It's something they can participate in. It's something that they can observe. So it's very motivating in that sense. It helps them remain relevant in their careers. So, for example, if you're teaching, specifically if you're teaching adults and business English, a general rule for businesses is that the employees that are the most successful are the ones that keep current with the latest news in their field. So if a student wants to be a successful scientist, then they have to keep reading up on the news about what's happening in science. If they want to be a very successful doctor, they have to know the various studies out there and the different advances. So it's good to begin to train them now to prepare for that. I've read a lot of novels about very successful people, millionaires and things like that. And that's one of the key things that they're always saying, the key to their success is they're constantly keeping up with the news, especially in their field. It gets them involved in their world. It begins to show students that it's not just the city they live in or even the area they live in, but that through showing them the news and world events, they get to really participate, get to be involved, and they get to learn about different things around the world. For example, right now on Twitter, if you're on Twitter, what's one of the biggest events, historical events, that you get to take part in on Twitter or throughout the news right now? Can someone type it? Can somebody guess? Historical event. Yes, exactly. Egypt, exactly. So these are things that you can now feel part of with different news and social media out there. They carry it around with them. Many of our students, especially in big cities and things that have public transportation, not necessarily in the United States, except if you're in, of course, DC or if you're in New York, but in Europe and many other places then students are constantly traveling on public transportation. And what do they do when they're on public transportation, when they're on subways, when they're on buses? They consume the news. You see newsstands everywhere on the street, and they're constantly picking up newspapers and things like that. It might be entertainment, it may be sports news, but they carry it always around them, so it's a great tool to be able to motivate them to begin trying, instead of just always in their language, to integrate English news as well. The same news, but it comes in English. And we'll talk about that. Now, let's think about the last slide really quick. The last slide, you see the newspaper, and that's something we typically are pretty much familiar with when we think about the news. But there are so many different forms of news that students can have access to. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Oh, I'm sorry, Ed. Can people hear me better? Tell me if you can hear me clearly. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know why it's like that. You may have to turn off my video. I think if you scroll over, Ed, my video, you can go ahead and you can turn it down. Okay, is that better with the sound? Okay. Okay, so one way is through Twitter. Many different teachers around the world are using Twitter with their students, so their students can keep up to date with different news events. The way they use Twitter is they get the real sources. You'll find often tweets from people living in the event. Right now you can find tweets from people in Egypt reporting the news, sharing links, sharing their own homemade videos. So Twitter is a great way to help students learn the news and keep track of it. It's great for English language learners because it's only 140 characters. So they have chunks of the language that they can try to keep up with, that they can try to understand. And then it comes in a series. They can follow a hashtag. That's one way to do it. There's also pretty much in every city in the world, most of the places that have news, the news stations, are now having Twitter feeds. So then you can follow different journalists, you can follow the different news channels, and things like that, or follow a hashtag. Apps on their mobile phones, that's a great way to have English language learners. Many of them will have mobile phones, especially if they're adults or teenagers. And on their mobile phones, they can access English, the news in English, and it can be world news. And I'll show you what some of those are. You have something called Newsy, and Newsy is made for English language learners. It's free. There are other sites, but the reason why I chose Newsy is because Newsy gives short news. It's very short. And they're videos, and they have transcripts for English language learners and quizzes. Excuse me. So Newsy is made, it's English news about English around the world. So it's a great way that you can use a mobile app that helps English language learners. It's made for English language learners. Vodcasts. Does anyone know what vodcasts are? Oh, that's great, Sue. And I have a surprise for you later, Sue. Does anyone know what a vodcast is? Okay. Well, I should have been more explicit. What is a vodcast? Yes, exactly. Like a podcast, but it's a video. There are many different video casts out there. The ones for English language learners I've found, you usually have to pay for, or you get so much for free, but it's like maybe 5 or 10 videos. I believe that the Business English podcast, they have a vodcast. It's very good. It's actually worth the money. But the Business English one, if you have adult students, it's very good, and they have a vodcast. They also have a podcast. There's several podcasts out there for English language learners. There's so many that integrate the news. I believe BOA is one. There's just many, 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 many. Oh, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, there's different apps in different places. To go back to Twitter, the way you use Twitter is you can have your students follow hashtags, or you can have them follow news sources. They don't have to keep up, they don't have to have a Twitter account. They can actually just go to the Twitter website. You can go to search.twitter.com, and then you can just type in a keyword like Egypt, and then you'll get all the tweets from everybody that's reporting about it. So that's one way that you can use Twitter. And then your students can just